everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion Lecture Series. We are absolutely delighted to be showing a historic documentary today entitled Lives Worth Living. And we are even more thrilled to have several members of the cast here with us today who will serve on a panel. We'd like to thank you all for coming. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our president of the university, Dr. T. Allen Hurwitz. Dr. Hurwitz. We also have two members of the National Association of the Deaf, Howard Rosenblum and Andrew Phillips. Welcome. Howard is actually on the way, but we're happy to have all of you with us today. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our Mistress of Ceremonies, Rachel Bass.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy to see everybody here. My name is Rachel Bass, and I'm a student here at Gallaudet University, majoring in psychology. It's my pleasure to be the Mistress of Ceremonies today for this program. I'd like to take this moment to introduce the panelists. First, we have Ms. Judith Heumann. She is one of the cast members in the film, Lives Worth Living, and she is also a special advisor for the International Rights for Peoples with Disabilities. Thank you for being here. I would also like to introduce Michael Winter. And he is a senior program analyst in the International Research Office for the Transit Administration. Thank you for being here. We also have with us Ms. Claudia Gordon. Ms. Gordon is a Board of Trustees member for Gallaudet University, and she is also Assistant Director to the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs in the Department of Labor. Thank you for being here. I'd like to take this moment to introduce Dr. Stephen Weiner. He is the provost here at Gallaudet University, and he will also be moderating the panel for today's program. We will show the film in a few moments, but first I would like to ask Dr. Weiner to share some historical perspectives of the disability rights movement, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as the Convention of Rights with Peoples with Disabilities. Welcome, Dr. Weiner.
I'd like to warn you all. I've made some changes and we'll just go with the flow. I'm going to mention a bit about the history, but I'm only going to be a poor replacement, to be honest with you, for the people who lived through this movement. I have so much respect for three of our panelists, and I personally know Judy and Claudia, and I've just met Mr. Winters for the first time. But from what I've learned and what I know, their stories and their lives have been amazing. I don't know if you know that Judy started training as a teacher for the deaf. Did you all know that? Was anybody aware? No. Oops, I'm incorrect. Sorry about that. So where did you learn sign, Judy? I do apologize. I take that back. Judy and I met for the first time in 1975 at the Center for Independent Living. She was the director, and I was one of those young fellows with a beard and long hair. And I remember some wonderful times there. And Mr. Winters followed Judy, and he joined the center in 1977. Is that correct? So the two of you all have been together for a very long time, right? The Centers for Independent Living were established by a very important man who I want you all to know. He's very well known in California, and I was very privileged to meet Ed Roberts. He was a brilliant man. He lost his mobility when he was 14 years old from polio. And he lived in an iron lung during the day and tried to work, but he wasn't allowed to go to school. The University of California at Berkeley would not allow him to go to school. He was brilliant, but they turned him down, and he fought back. The Centers for Independent Living was one of his dream children to show the world what was possible and what disabled people could do. But this disability, the movement did not start in the 70s. It started many years prior to that when the veterans from the war came home and people were trying to figure out what to do with them. So the Veterans Administration was formed after World War I to serve those veterans. But as of World War II, and if you all can remember Days of Our Lives with Henry Russell, Harold Russell became chair of the President's Commission on Employment of People with Disabilities many, many years ago. But at that time, the civil rights movement was in its inception during the 50s and 60s, and the disability community also said we have needs as well, and they looked at each other and began to organize and develop some activism on the grassroots level. And it began in many cities and began to become a unified effort and became the American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities. And our president was a board member, correct, Dr. Hurwitz? And Judy was a board member as well, and many others. And one of the biggest moments of unification came in 1977, when many of us locked ourselves in a federal building. Now, to let you know, several of our Gallaudet students, over 300 of them, went and also locked ourselves in to help there. And there were many of us who were involved in that coalition, forcing the signing of the Section 508, the Civil Rights Law. That law was passed in '74, but was not put into place for many years after that. There's lots of history, and again, many rights did not come into place until much later, and that's where a young attorney comes in now, Ms. Claudia Gordon. She had access to go to law school and had the ability to come, and her perspective is very, very important to us now. And right now, she's an attorney with the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor is significant, particularly with her role, because today, many disabled people continue to be underemployed, temporarily employed, or unemployed. And many of them have skills that are commensurate with anyone. So we're very happy to have you here, Claudia. And you have a perspective of the earlier days, and now we have the perspective of the later days, and it's going to be very important on the moderation of this movie. Now, I will not belabor my comments, but we are going to watch the movie. and we'll have more comments afterwards. Before we watch the film, I'd like to thank, first of all, Dr. Greenwald. Are you here? Dr. Brian Greenwald, are you in the audience? He is one of the co-chairs for the Deaf President Now 25th Anniversary Celebration. And also Fred for working with Brian. And finally, I would like to thank Dr. Angela McCaskill, our Chief Diversity Officer, for leading this movement and making it possible today. Thank you to everyone. So let's let the show begin. Had a very powerful impact on all of us, and I hope you enjoyed it. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Weiner and our panelists. If you would come forth to the stage, Dr. Weiner will moderate the panel. Thank you, Dr. Weiner. Watching this film, really brings back a lot of things for me. And I'm wondering if any of you would like to spend a few moments, each of you, sharing what this brings up for you as you watched it. We can start with Judy.
Oh. I always get emotional when I watch this film for many reasons, but it's both very exciting to see what has happened over the last 4 decades, and to also see where we are today, and to know how much further we have to go. It's also sad in many ways to see so many great people who have died over the years, and to think about, who are the new emerging leaders to take the places of some of these very dynamic leaders. And I see many of you out here, and some of you have to take those positions of leadership. I also see in this film something very important for me, which is that we are a cross-disability movement. So we are not a movement representing only physically disabled people, or only people who are blind, or only people who are deaf, or only people who have intellectual disabilities, or only people who have mental health disabilities. This law, the ADA, and Section 504 made us realize that if we continued to advocate for changes for blind people and didn't consider the issues that deaf people and other people were facing, legislators were not paying attention to us. If we only looked at the issues for physically disabled people or whatever the disability, legislators were not paying attention to us. They basically said, if you can come together and agree on what needs to happen, then something will happen. I don't really think they believed that we would ever be able to come together. And what we have seen in the 1970s through today is there are variations and things that we individually need to be able to live our lives equally within society. But at the end of the day, we were able to come together and say, we all are fighting for equality. And I think that's what's important about this film.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Gallaudet University for showing this film, and also for their role in the civil rights movement, especially the disabled civil rights movement. This film brought back memories of my involvement in this particular protest, but also my involvement in the disability rights movement. And last night I was trying to think of a word that could summarize my feelings, and I guess the word that came up was dignity. This really gave me a sense of dignity to be involved with this and to be able to fight for our rights and the dignity of a deaf person to go to the emergency room and have an interpreter, the dignity of someone with cerebral palsy to go into a restaurant and not be thrown out because the other customers objected to them being there, the dignity of a blind person being able to go to school and to have access to Braille and readers. So this is all about dignity. I grew up on welfare. I had a sister who was African American and a lesbian. And when I was doing this, I was not only doing this for myself, and I was doing it for myself, but I was thinking about all the other issues in my life, you know, the issues of trying to be part of society, the issues of trying to integrate yourself. And so this just brought about this whole issue of dignity. When I went to school, my undergraduate major was philosophy, and I studied Gandhi, I studied Martin Luther King. I was a proud student of Saul Alinsky. So I said, this is the time to use all these skills to take on the establishment and tell them that we're not going to take it anymore, and we have a right to be part of the society just like anyone else. That's it.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to thank Dr. Hurwitz and Vicki, and also Dr. McCaskill for hosting this wonderful program, and also other members of the President's Cabinet, and all of those who are here today. It's an honor to share the stage with Judy and Michael. They are my colleagues, and they are also my role models for obvious reasons. I have profound respect for the two of you because of your leadership. And you established the foundation that would improve the lives of those for future generations, including myself. And I'd like to share a few things. First, recognizing that things don't just get better. And the film was able to also show the fact that people need to take action to make things better. In fact, people like Judy and Michael, Dr. King, Rosa Parks, who sat on the front of the bus. She became the mother of the civil rights movement. It shows that we need to take action to make improvements, to remove issues of racial segregation or discrimination or disability rights. We need to take action for liberation. It's not given by those who are oppressing us. It's something that needs to be demanded, and that's what this film was about, is demanding our rights and being recognized and respected with dignity in this country. As I was considering my attendance today, I found a quote when I was reading of some historical events, and there was something that Dr. King said. He said, "People think a revolution always starts with injustice, and that's not true. A revolution actually begins with hope." And that is the important key for revelation. And so for myself and Judy and Michael, Fred Fay, Justin Dart, all of the students who led the Deaf President Now movement, they all had hope for a better day, a better future. And that is where revolution begins. And that hope that one day disability rights would be considered a civil right and not an issue of charity. That people with disabilities can become full participants in the society, have careers, pay taxes, experience independence, and in this film, to maximize their abilities and to not waste their lives, to have control of one's life. And in this revolution, we've had hope of all of those things. And I'm very grateful for all of those pioneers and trailblazers who have established those foundations for people like myself, who grew up in poverty in Jamaica, to move to America in the rough streets of South Bronx. Their work laid the foundation and gave me hope that would one day bring me to college to secure degrees and become an attorney. So for those of you post-ADA, post-504, post-DPN, you know, it's very easy to become complacent. There's so much access today. It's almost hard to even recognize what life used to be like without those things, to easily take accessibility for granted. Being able to attend universities and receive interpreting services, or to have physical access to all areas in the United States. And it's so easy to take that for granted, but it's important to remember that the struggle is not yet over. We still have a responsibility to continue the movement. The movement doesn't happen in a moment. The movement continues. And so now, within my own generation and those that are younger than me, we have to work hard to continue building the foundation that has been laid for us. You know, just because we have laws and acts enacted doesn't mean that everything is better. We still have work to do. So the ADA, the 504, created potential and hope, but we still have work to do to continue to maximize that potential. What Judy has sacrificed and Michael has sacrificed and many others who have sacrificed for us, we cannot take their efforts in vain.
You brought up many different dynamics, and one thing I'd like to follow up on right now, you talked about mentoring, and you have several different mentors, including the two of them, but I'm curious about the two of you. Back then, who were your mentors related to disability rights?
Well, my mentor was Judith Heumann.
I'm the oldest in the group.
Yeah, actually, I was a student at Southern Illinois University when the 504 building was occupied, and we immediately said, oh, that's a great idea. So we occupied the president of the university's office and chained a wheelchair to his office and left it there. So later on, I met Judy at the White House conference on handicapped individuals, and I said, can I come to Berkeley, and do an internship with you? And she said, yes, of course, So she is really, she's a great human being, and but she's also the kind of person that always had the time to mentor other people and to allow other people into the movement. She's a very, very unselfish person. And I don't want anything from you right now.
So I want to say something about mentors because it's a very good question. In my generation, we would think about people like Franklin Roosevelt as a mentor, even though I had obviously never met him because he was dead before I was born, and people like Helen Keller and others. But I think one aspect of the movement, not just the disability movement, is that older and younger people together can be each other's mentors. So I have deep respect for Claudia. I think she does fantastic work. She's a fantastic leader. She represents many different facets of our society. So for me, she in a very real way is a mentor and a person that I look up to because I can learn from her also. And I think that's very important. We all, we are probably one of the most diverse movements because we represent race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability groupings, etc. And, you know, for me, when I was growing up in New York, and I was in Brooklyn, too bad she wasn't from Brooklyn, but she lived in the Bronx. What can you say?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Yes,
I'm
I
from
know.
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, good. It's a joke, but it's a joke. But at any rate, when I started finally to be able to go to school, I was 9 years old. I was in the 4th grade. And the schools in New York were just beginning to desegregate. So the school I went to was an all-white school, but the classes for disabled children were segregated. They were also racially integrated. So it was very interesting that we, as disabled people, physical disabilities, could not participate in almost anything in the school. But we were a racially integrated group. And the camps that I went to for disabled children were also racially integrated. So as I was growing up, you know, there were many different things happening. We were all being discriminated against because we had disabilities. And we were coming together to begin to think about how the world could be different. And so when we went to camp, for example, in the summer, we would spend, you know, when we were 10, 11, 12, and older, we really did start to think about how the world could be different. And Steve asked, how did I learn sign language? So I went to this camp, and one summer there were 3 deaf people in my cabin and in the cabin next door. And I didn't know sign language, and they, of course, could not lip read. So they started to teach me sign language. There was a speech therapist at that camp who came over to me and said, I should not use sign language because the deaf people at the camp would not learn how to lip read and speak. And I was 12 or 13, and it made no sense to me. So, of course, they kept teaching me sign language, and we had a better ability to communicate. But then as I was getting older and meeting more deaf people and learning about the whole struggle of oralism versus sign language, I thought that camp gave me an experience that I probably never would have had otherwise. So, you know, we've learned lots of lessons, and we should see ourselves all as mentors, mentoring each other.
I realize that we do absolutely have a lot to learn from each other. And I know, Claudia, you represent a lot of our hopes and dreams for the future. A lot of our young people look up to you. How did you decide to become an attorney, given your background and your upbringing? What had you pick civil rights? And I think it's really very relevant to the film, of course.
Well, I think many know that I was born in Jamaica, and in Jamaica there are no disability rights. And when I became deaf, I was removed from my school, and I was kept home for almost 2 years until my mother could move from Jamaica with myself to New York. And basically my experience in Jamaica was being told what I can't do. I also saw how other people who were also different experienced life. And even we didn't have labels of, for example, disability or have people having different abilities. And Jamaica and the society were very ignorant, I guess is the right word to use. And so when I moved to the School for the Deaf in New York, I was so struck by the fact that everything that I had thought, everything that I was forced to believe about my abilities and my future were wrong. I was almost led to believe that there was no purpose in my life and that I had no future because I was deaf. Then when I attended the Lexington School for the Deaf, I had peers who had incredible lives. I had some teachers who were deaf, and I became a member of the community, the National Deaf Advocacy communities. I became a deaf leader and the National Black Deaf Association. I also met Lindsay Dunn, who had a tremendous impact on my life and my identity. And so I had many people and many experiences in my life that helped me develop into who I am today. And who taught me that regardless of the fact that I was deaf, that I had the ability to dream about my future, to contribute to society. And by my sophomore year, I had decided that a degree in law would give me the tools that I needed to create the change in society, especially in fighting for that continual struggle that we see in the civil rights of people with disabilities. And so going from the Lexington School for the Deaf and then attending and graduating from Howard University became the impetus for me to know that I could succeed in a mainstream environment. And if I could share with all of you that it's important to step out of your comfort zones. And one thing that I'd like to mention about the film, certainly we've had laws established and passed over the last 30 years, and yet we still have issues with attitude. So those are barriers that still exist. So I suggest for those of you who can and want to succeed and make change, you need to step out of your comfort zones, become educators to those, correct misperceptions about people with disabilities, prove people wrong, change attitudes, and I find that those are some of the major barriers that we are experiencing today. When I became a student at Howard University, I had made a request for interpreting services, and at that time they were very unaware of how to do that, but I worked with them, and luckily I was able to receive those accommodations, but it was because I knew what my rights were as a deaf person. And so the reason why I went to law school is because I believed that having a degree in law would give me the tools that I needed to remove the barriers of oppression.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you, because people understand that you've succeeded, but we do have to go outside of our comfort zone, and that's a very good point. And now I'd like to shift to something that's a little depressing, if you will. Recently, our Congress refused to pass and accept the Convention of Rights with people with disabilities. And it was one of the most depressing moments in my life. And I'm sure that's true for each of us here. I cannot believe, and I can't get beyond, that they are not listening. I want to hear from you what you all think we should do next. It's really appalling.
So now I work for the government, so I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what's happening. So let me first say, Steve mentioned something called the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's something that you can go online and read. It's not very long. It is a United Nations treaty which came into force in 2008. It was adopted in New York at the United Nations in 2006. It is very much modeled on the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is a treaty that came about because people with all types of disabilities came together from around the world when the United Nations agreed that they would allow discussions to move forward to have a treaty. Very similar to what you saw here with 504 and then the Americans with Disabilities Act. So when President Obama came in 2009, he signed what we call CRPD, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The previous administration had been unwilling to sign and was unwilling to ask the Senate for permission to ratify. So the Obama administration changed all this. We signed, and then the next steps were that a piece of legislation had to be introduced. So all the federal agencies were involved in doing a review of the CRPD, comparing it to all the major legislation in the United States, put together language that says the United States should ratify the CRPD because we believe that we are in compliance. Our laws in education, in housing, in transportation, in information, communication technology, et cetera, we are in compliance. So, Senate, please vote for approval. And there's an organization called the United States International Council on Disability. They're here in Washington. Mark Abristo, who was on the film, is the chairperson of their board. Their executive director is a gentleman named David Morrissey. They work very hard getting disabled people from around the United States, Democrats and Republicans, to support the ratification. The government worked very hard to give information on what is the CRPD, why should we ratify, what changes, if any, would be required. And we worked very, very hard, and we thought in December, when the vote came up, that we had enough votes. You need 2/3 of the Senate in order to make a recommendation to the president to ratify any what's called a UN treaty. And the day of the vote, it lost. We had 61 supporting, we needed 67. Every Democrat voted in favor, and about 7 Republicans voted in favor. The other Republicans, I actually think, never really thought that there would be a backlash against their actions. But after the vote, for those of you who watch people like Stephen Colbert or Rachel Maddow, Anderson Cooper, there was a lot of publicity from people from different political persuasions saying exactly what Steve just said. Why did the Congress not vote to ratify? I think what needs to happen is you need to look at this, you need to look at the states you come from, you need to look at how your members voted. You may want to contact USID and have them come here and talk. But I think it's very important that disabled people express our views. You understand that it is very important for deaf people and people with other disabilities to be able to travel abroad, to be able to look at going to universities abroad, to be able to look at the possibility of a job abroad. And that means that the laws that we have here, we have to help other countries develop those same kinds of laws with strong enforcement. Most countries don't have that. So the administration is saying that the US has been the gold standard in disability. We need to be able to continue to be the gold standard internationally, and it's up to all of us to make sure that the Congress understands that we think it is important that we ratify. 129 governments have already ratified. 129. All the European countries have ratified, and we have not. It's a major embarrassment.
Yeah, I like to give you an example. I've been working in the transportation field for 20 years, and more than that if you count my years organizing demonstrations against them. But the reality is that the United States has the opportunity to create business opportunities overseas, not only in the area of transportation, making transportation accessible to people in wheelchairs, to people who are deaf, to people who have intellectual disabilities, all over the world. The world is asking us to assist them. This is true in terms of the ability to, as Judy mentioned, the ability to educate people in an integrated way around the world. Gallaudet University, not only from a pure, civil rights perspective, but from a business perspective, has an opportunity to create business opportunities all over the world. So what, and again, I work for the government too, but what the Congress did not make economic sense for the businesses of the United States of America. It was a bad business decision for them to do this, And hopefully, this 2013, people will come to their senses, not only from a civil rights perspective, but from a business perspective, do the right thing and look at this again and just do the right thing.
I mean, this law, for example, would require the treaty itself, for those countries that have adopted it, it requires that education be provided. And as you know, many deaf children around the world are not in any school at all. And for those who are in school, they're frequently getting a very inferior education. So that point by itself, we have the opportunity, and Gallaudet currently plays a strong role in this, in helping other countries learn how to educate deaf individuals, train teachers, open doors to universities.
Briefly, I'd just like to reinforce what Judy said. Be in touch with your congressional representatives as well as your senators. Encourage them to vote. This bill is very, very important. Dr. King, I really look up to him, and what he said is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we're here and things are going well for us, and we have a variety of protections under the law in this country, but it should not be enough for us to turn a blind eye. We have to look at what's happening to our sisters and brothers in other countries. We have to be concerned about their civil rights and their access and their ability to participate fully in society. So I encourage each of you to be a part of the movement to get this passed in time by actively and assertively being in touch with your congressional people. That's our job.
Thank you very much. I have one more question for the panel, and then I'll open it up to the audience for questions. As I was looking through some historical books and texts, I find that there's little or no mention of disability rights in the books that I'm seeing, or it's in the sidebars. How can we change that? I mean, how can we change the history and how it's represented in our books today?
So I have to tell you a funny story. In the 1990s, 97, 98, I started getting calls from different parts of the country, from children in elementary school and middle school. Could they interview me? These were not disabled children. And I asked, how did you get my name? It turns out that in books that are being written, textbooks in schools, they don't need permission to write something about you. And so I am in a number of social studies books. And still today, every year, between November and December, I get calls. So there are some changes, that are happening. I just did an interview, a group of kids in Texas and a group of kids in Illinois. They're competing in these national competitions on history, and disability is a part of it because of this 1 or 2 pages in these books. We are beginning to see now more information on disability. I think some of the good disability studies programs at universities around the world, around the United States, the disability studies programs, we're seeing that people from those programs are also writing, and some of these chapters are going in regular books. But in the next 5 to 10 years, I think we'll see more inclusion as the issue of disability is seen more as a rights-based issue. I think we talk about charity to rights. In the Deaf President Now movement, that was very strong. Deaf President gives so many important messages, and I think ultimately those messages where people like ourselves and like yourselves, as you get out of school and get meaningful jobs in many different places, we begin to demonstrate what we're talking about when we look at equality for disabled people.
I think that the disability studies programs are very important, but I also think that, and I believed in this throughout my life, is that we've got to integrate disability and history into the regular curriculums. You know, we've got to integrate it into the philosophy curriculums. We've got to integrate it into the teaching curriculums. You know, even though they might not be related to special ed necessarily. You know, we've got to integrate what we have gone through as a culture and a people into the American studies and the international studies. So I think that there needs to be an effort to do that. I don't know if I'm going to do that or Judy's going to do that, but you know, I think we all have responsibility that every time anything is taught in this country, especially about civil rights or about history, if people with disabilities are not mentioned, it's our obligation to mention it. I've seen a number of commercials on TV lately talking about the civil rights movements. And it's great that they're having these commercials on TV, but I don't hear anything mentioned about the disabled civil rights movement. And CSNBC has this wonderful commercial about, isn't it great for civil rights, you know, lesbian rights, gay rights, African American rights, but there's something missing, you know, when they don't mention disability rights, especially when we just had the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons at the forefront.
Let me say one thing on this point. This film, I work at the Department of State, and that means that we work with all of the U.S. embassies around the world. And we have what's called Educational Cultural Affairs Office. So this film, the department was able to buy the rights for the film, so it can be shown all over the world. And it actually is the most requested film that we have now at the State Department. So this film is going to be shown all over the world. And it'll be shown not just to disabled people, but to others. And exactly as Michael is saying, what we are trying to do in the area of human rights is to get disability part of the overall human rights discussion. And this film will be amazingly dramatic in countries. We're also encouraging that the embassies ask people in the disability community in their particular country, do you have any films that could be shown at the embassy which talk about the movement that is growing in your country? And many countries do have documentation. So I think in those countries where we can show this film and show what's going on locally, that will also be very powerful.
I don't necessarily have anything to add except to recognize that each of us has a role to make a change. We don't have to wait for others to make that move. If you all have that experience of finding a textbook and you know that there could be a section there that would expand on disability, civil rights, you yourselves can make that change by contacting the authors of the book rather than sitting back and letting things go by or waiting for other people to take action. It is on you to take that time and take accountability in how we are documented and how we will continue to be documented as a civil rights group, and that will create progress, and that starts with us as individuals. We need to be vocal and to be educators in the mainstream society so that people recognize more and more that disability rights are a part of disability, and it's a part of human diversity. When we talk about civil rights, that automatically disability is a part of that discussion, and it's not something that is separate or something that receives special treatment. And so education is a large part of that.
Thank you to each of you. And I realize, unfortunately, that our time has run out. But Claudia, I'd really like to thank you for making the statement, because it's a perfect close to what we've done today. And I don't think any of us could have said it better. Thank you for joining our board, and thank you to each of you for being on the panel. Thank you so much, everyone.